We are live now. Ananya, can you give? Oh, okay, brilliant.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And sorry for just this technical glitch and starting 4 minutes late. Uh, First of all, thank you so much for joining. Just to give you some context, so as a part of SwaTaleem's dissemination webinar series and as a culmination to our Volunteer Appreciation Week, we have convened together to discuss the experiences, motivation, and the difference that has been made by our volunteers through their volunteering. And for the friends who are joining for the first time with SwaTaleem, just to give a brief overview of how we work. So SwaTaleem works towards providing better life opportunities for underrepresented rural adolescent girls and aiding them in attaining their full potential as young women. And today, like as part of our esteemed panel, we have 6 stellar volunteers with us who have their own individual stories to share on how volunteering has influenced their lives. Just to keep it in an alphabetical order, I'll introduce them and I'll just ask them to say hi like while I introduce them, so you can put a face to a name. So to start with, we have with us Anika. She has graduated from University of Illinois and Urbana-Champaign from having done computer science and anthropology. Her roots are from Haryana. She worked as a volunteer during her graduation, and then she came back as a volunteer while working in an MNC bank. She has been working consistently with us, and her efforts can be seen in series of posters and annual reports that you see for SwaTaleem. Anika, would you want to say hi to everyone?
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you for joining today, Anika.
Course.
And we have with us Anjali. So Anjali currently work in capacity of a teacher and advisor at Next School. She has done her graduation as BSc Honors in Psychology with Management and Liberal Studies Education as a Young India Fellow 2019-20. In this panel, she is among the 2 people who has worked directly with girls of KGBV, specifically in Jalmana at Panipat, as part of her experiential learning module at Ashoka University. Anjali, would you like to say hi to everyone?
Hello.
Thank you, Anjali, for joining us today. Introducing our third panelist for today, and I'll shift in Hindi during this introduction. तो आज हमारे साथ कानपुर से जुड़ी हैं इंदू जी. इंदू जी ने अपनी पढ़ाई साइकोलॉजी में एक मास्टर स्टूडेंट के तौर पर करी कानपुर यूनिवर्सिटी से. अभी वो एक होम मेकर के तौर पर काम करती हैं और पैंडेमिक के समय में जब कोविड आया तो उस समय बच्चियों के माता पिता से जुड़ने में उन्होंने अपना समय दिया और एक गृहिणी होते हुए भी समय निकाला और इस मुहिम से जुड़ी रही. तो इंदु जी, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. आप एक बार सभी को यदि नमस्ते बोलना चाहें, हाय बोलना चाहें तो अनम्यूट करके बोल सकते हैं.
नमस्कार सभी को. हाय.
Namaste, Induji. And next, we have Kavya with us. She works as a young people's educator from Nirantar Trust. She has done her graduation in history and done liberal studies education as a Young India Fellow 2018-19. She is the second panelist for today who has worked directly with girls of KGBV Jalmana at Panipat as part of her experiential learning module at Ashoka University. Hi, Kavya.
Hi.
So good to have you here with us today.
Same here.
Next, we have with us Shafag. Shafag hails from Iran and she's pursuing her PhD studies in educational technology and has her master's in design. She has been working with us for 2 years. Her work can be specifically reflected in the graphic designing of our modules and designing of volunteer management system with us. She also got an opportunity to mentor some of the upcoming new volunteers. Hi, Shafag.
Hi everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. And last but not the least, we have Surbhi with us. She has done her bachelor's in developmental psychology and is going to pursue her master's in human resources. She is the face behind all our social media and summer volunteer recruitment process that takes place at UIUC. Hi, Surbhi.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, so good to have you here. Uh, so to start with, I would like to, I'll just get on with questions. So I would like to start with Surbhi. Surbhi, as part of being a graduate student, how did you came to know about SwaTaleem's work, and why did you choose to engage in volunteering specifically?
So I have been volunteering since I moved to America. I come from Bangalore, and then I moved to Mysore, and then I moved to New Jersey in the US. So it's a whole travel story. But ever since I came here, I've been volunteering. I volunteered for the Arts Council near me. I would just help out. There would be kids, and I loved working with kids. So I would do that a lot. And yeah, like as far as I can remember, I've always done volunteering, and like anything I do, I always see it as some sort of volunteering because I'm always giving back to the community, and I get joy out of doing it, and I like seeing other people happy that I'm doing the work too. So that's sort of my experience with how I got started with volunteering in general. How I got started with SwaTaleem, my sophomore year of college, I actually was in a class when Ananya was talking about SwaTaleem and the work that they do. And I thought it was so cool that, the work they do is in India. I come from India, so it was really close to me. And I was also really interested in like the girls and gender aspect. And it was really interesting to me to be more involved and like learn more about this issue and how like I can be a part of like lowering child marriage rates and like increasing the education in like rural parts of India. So that's sort of why I was interested, and that's how I started working for SwaTaleem or volunteering.
Thank you so much, Surbhi, for sharing your experience. And just as a follow-up question, what has been your most interesting aspect of the work that you do? Like, where do you find that joy of pursuing volunteering while rest of your friends who are in college might not do the same thing? So where do you find that joy?
So in terms of SwaTaleem, I think like the one specific experience that sticks out to me is the fundraising campaign we did like last September, I believe. That was super challenging and rewarding at the same time. I thought that was super fun. I had a lot of fun like reaching out to people, being like, hey, like we're doing this for a good cause, like you can be part of that. So like help me out so we can help 900 girls stay in school during COVID too. So it was really interesting. It was a really interesting experience for me. And I feel like that was the most memorable experience for me. And I had a lot of fun being a part of SwaTaleem. And apart from that, I really like just doing social media stuff on the side with Meghna, who's not here today, but she also helps me out with social media. And yeah, I like doing what I do.
Yeah, thank you so much, Surbhi, for sharing that. And I think both Surbhi and Meghna, during the time of our fundraising campaign, came up with a lot of interesting and innovative ways to rally funds and resources around a cause. So people can definitely reach out to them and figure out what all they did. Um, Moving on to our next question, and this question is specifically for Kavya. So Kavya, during your time like your participation with SwaTaleem has been specifically on the lines of your project that you had to do during your Young India Fellowship. And I would want to ask you, like, how those experiences of working with girls in the school, where you had to go and sort of conduct session every fortnight, influenced your life in general, and did it help you in any way? And if you can respond to that.
So actually, the relationship with SwaTaleem has been really incredible in a way, because I remember the first time we applied for this project, even the name of this organization was something else. So to be a part of that really growing stage and then learning ourselves was a very wholesome experience. Currently, I work as a young people's educator. So that means I work with out of school adolescent girls and very young adolescent girls and boys. And this is really similar to what the girls go through in KGBVs. So working with the girls in KGBVs was kind of like, it set a precedent. It gave me some learnings which you only could have had while you're there, like in person, like seeing the cook and the warden in the school interact with the girls and understand how the people or staff or any facilitator for that matter in that space, be it a school or a center, how central they are to the learning and actually creating a safe space for the girls. So that's one thing. Another thing is, apart from all the resources and the opportunities and the educational push that the girls need, I realized that the thing that they needed the most was just understanding, and the fact that you go there and you encourage them, you motivate them, and you talk to them as if they're just your friends and they're not even little girls. That's another thing. We often treat adolescent girls as really young kids, but we need to realize, especially coming from certain circumstances, they're really grown up, they've faced a lot, and we need to treat them as young adults. So that was another thing. So there were a lot of things which built up. And actually, especially being a part of SwaTaleem at that stage, really gave my team, like we call ourselves the Hum Patch, or 5 team members, that gave us a space to really go out and try things, like really have that accountability and create that participatory feel, so that we could interact and then take that confidence and experience to our later on work, whether it be in an NGO or anywhere else. So I think that was really crucial.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Kavya, for sharing that. I still remember, like Kavya used to have this conversation, like among the group, among the team, on while she was contemplating of her future endeavors, and like I still remember her conversations around gender and her conversations around how to proceed that forward that we used to have during that ELM time period. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I'm very lucky that I got to do this, because I've always wanted to work in gender, but I never figured out how does one work in gender. So this experience was just like, oh, okay, this is the stepping stone, and it was just a perfect way to just launch out.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Kavya. And like moving forward, I think my next question would be for Shafaq. So Shafaq, you hail from Iran and you have been doing your studies in design and right now in education technology as well at UIUC. And having like, I would want to know, like sometimes it can get really difficult for someone to be so far away from a context of what the work is, how the work is happening there. Like where did you find that motivation and where did you find that relatability with the cause that you were volunteering for while being a volunteer at SwaTaleem?
So yeah, that's right. Actually, one of the, I think, after joining SwaTaleem, one of the biggest challenges, I think, was what you just mentioned. I think the first thing that was very important for me that I joined SwaTaleem was the cause, and then also not just the cause, but like in the more importantly, what their approach was to kind of address that challenge or issue. And so, and then I started working with SwaTaleem, and also like in the beginning, I had more kind of interaction with Ananya. So as in the university, we had like this regular weekly sessions, and we talked about it a lot. And I think one of those things that really helped me was in the first place, I used to like read a lot about India, and like I had some kind of like background information about India, and I loved to work on something that give me more like context about different things in India. And also I had some kind of like so back to Iran, there are some, like, I saw some kind of similar context or like environment situations that I could relate to in terms of like this, not similar to KGVB schools, but a kind of similar experience. I didn't have the like direct kind of interactions with people there, but I had some kind of background about what is also happening in Iran. I could see some similarities between them. And it was really interesting to me to see how people are addressing these kind of challenges in other countries, and how I can learn from this experience. I can bring that experience also into other, like into my country, into other contexts, and how it can be replicated. And I think what really helped to kind of relate to the situation was the discussion, the conversations that we had. So I think the team was really supportive in terms of helping me to understand what's happening in schools. Like, I think even the pictures from the like schools, the photos, it was really helpful for me to relate to it. And also like having those, although we didn't have like the kind of in-person face-to-face interaction, the meetings, the Zoom meetings that we had with like the India team and people who are working on the ground, that was really helpful. And also, yeah, I think I felt that although I wasn't there, other people who were there working there could give me more context about that and answered all those questions that I had. So I think that was really helpful, like the support that I got from the team.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting point that Shafaq has raised. Sometimes how small things as visual mediums, just like pictures, can help you find relatability, can help you find togetherness, yet being from a different context. I think that's a very interesting point. And I still remember that Shafaq had a job to design the modules in Hindi, which is not even her second language. And she would sort of put a lot of hard work into just understanding where the things would go. And then she would coordinate calls during the time that were out of her comfort zone. So yeah, I still remember those phases of hard work as well. So thank you, Shafaq, for sharing that. And yeah, so moving forward, I have next question for इंदु जी. तो इंदु जी, मेरा आपसे सवाल ये है कि आप कानपुर से आती हैं और आपने स्वतालीम के साथ पैंडेमिक के समय में जब कोविड आया और वहाँ पे एक बहुत बड़ी आवश्यकता थी कि बच्चियों के माता पिता से चर्चा की जाए, तो एक गृहिणी होने के बावजूद समय निकालना और उस समय में जब आप बातचीत कर रही हैं तो जो एक अनुभव होता है, यदि आप उसके बारे में थोड़ा बातचीत कर पाएं कि वो अनुभव आपके लिए कैसा रहा और वो समय निकालना कितना कठिन होता है, कितना आसान होता है और उसमें आप कैसे एक उद्देश्य देख पाते हैं.
सबसे पहले तो मैं सभी को नमस्कार करती हूँ कानपुर से. और जो स्वतालीम के संपर्क में मैं पिछले साल अक्टूबर में आई और ये हमारे लिए एक जो लॉकडाउन लगा उसमें, तो उसमें हमें एक अपना जो स्वयं का जो समय था वो हमने जो देना शुरू किया स्वतालीम के लिए, तो वो उसके लिए मुझे एक अच्छा अनुभव मुझे प्राप्त हुआ. और दूसरी बात ये कि जब हमको बताया गया, जो वॉलंटियर्स थे वहाँ पे, आरजू हैं, मनोरमा से हमारी बात हुई, तो उन्होंने जब हमको बताया कि आपको उनके पेरेंट्स से फोन पे ही बात करना है और उनसे सारी प्रश्नों को पूछना है कि आपके बच्चे कैसे और आपको कैसा महसूस हो रहा है, तो फोन करने के दौरान और उनके मम्मी पापा से बातचीत के दौरान जो हमारी उनसे बातचीत होती थी वो बहुत पॉजिटिव में होती थी। मतलब उनसे बात करके ये लगता था कि लॉकडाउन में जो उनके बच्चियों के लिए जो स्कूल्स बंद हैं उनसे वो मम्मी पापा ज्यादा परेशान हैं। तो जो हम लोग की बातचीत का जो सजेशन हम देते थे, जो उनके लिए हम बात करते थे, उन्हें बहुत अच्छा लगता था कि हमारे घर रह करके बच्चियों को बारे में वॉलंटियर्स इतना ध्यान देते हैं, तो वो बहुत खुश हो जाते थे। तो इसके लिए हमारे लिए प्लस पॉइंट ये हुआ कि जो हमें भी लॉकडाउन में अकेलापन रहता था या हमें जो 2-3 घंटे स्पेयर मिल जाते थे, तो उसको हमें एक व्यतीत करने का एक अच्छा हमें समय मिला उसके लिए, और खुद का अनुभव भी बहुत अच्छा लगा। इसके लिए हमारा ये रहा कि हम इसके आगे और भी निरंतर जुड़ना चाहते हैं, जुड़ना रहने चाहते हैं, क्योंकि जो अशिक्षा का जो सबसे बड़ा जो छोटे छोटे बच्चियां हैं उनकी कहीं वो लोग भी बताते हैं कि कहीं मजबूरी में, कहीं उनकी कोई परेशानी की वजह से शादी कर दें, ये हम लोग का एक मजबूरी होता था। लेकिन जब ये कस्तूरबा गांधी से जुड़े, केजीवीपी से जुड़े और आप लोग के वॉलंटियर से इतना फोन के द्वारा प्रश्न उत्तर दिया गया, उससे वो लोग इतना प्रभावित हुए कि और स्कूलों के बजाय ये आपका स्वतालीम इतना अच्छा जा रहा है वहां पे कि वो लोग इतने खुश हैं कि हमारे बच्चों के लिए एक बहुत विश्वास उन्होंने किया कि आप लोग इतना ध्यान देते हो और हर पल, हर हफ्ते, हर महीने का एक ब्यौरा लेते हैं आप हमसे और हमसे इंटरेक्ट रखते हैं। दूसरी बात जो रही हमारी बात, तो हमारे लिए तो ये एक अच्छी बात रही कि हमने भी एक एनजीओ को कह लीजिए या एक हमको मतलब सोशल में एक अच्छा सा समय व्यतीत करने का और अपना अनुभव उनसे साझा करने का और अनुभव उन्हें लेने देने का, ये हमारे लिए बहुत अच्छी बात रही। और रही ये घर गृहस्थी की बात है, तो इसमें हमारे लिए जो 1-2 घंटे का जो हमने टाइम निकाला, वो मैं शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहती हूँ कि इसी बहाने मुझे कुछ समय निकालने का मौका मिला। जी, शुक्रिया।
जी, नो शुक्रिया इंदु जी। और आपने जो एक बात कही जो मुझे मतलब मेरे ज़हन में बहुत गहराई से गई है कि कई बार जैसे हम खुद तो कोविड के समय मतलब इतना कुछ चीजें चल रही थी, कई बार हम आसानी से दुख से घिर सकते हैं, आसपास की खबरों से घिर सकते हैं। तो ये जो एक दूसरे के सुख दुख में बात करने का भी जो वो रहता है, उससे खुद को तो मतलब हमें लगता है हम दूसरों को से ज्यादा खुद को सुकून दे रहे होते हैं सिर्फ किसी से 2 पल बात करके या तो वो उससे मैं काफी सहमत हूँ। और मुझे याद है कि जब ये पूरा सत्र चल रहा था, जब आप बातचीत कर रहे थे, तो कई जगह पे पेरेंट्स ने ये भी बोला आपसे कि हमें बड़ा अच्छा लगा कि एक मतलब स्कूल से किसी का फोन आया है। तो वो अनुभव भी एक बहुत अच्छा अनुभव। जी, आप बोलिए। आप
2 बातें यहाँ जोड़ना चाहूंगी। केजीवीपी का पुन्हाना स्कूल है जो वहां पे रुखसाना नाम की एक लड़की पढ़ती है, तो उसके फादर का नाम अरशद है। तो मेरी उनसे पापा से ही बात हुई उनकी, तो वो बहुत खुश हुए और इवन उन्होंने मेरा पूरा डिटेल, फोन नंबर वगैरह सब पूरा लिया कि मैम हम आपसे बात कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि हम अपनी बच्ची को डॉक्टर बनाना चाहते हैं और हम नहीं चाहते हैं कि वो उसकी शादी हम जल्दी करें, और जितना ये पढ़ सके हम उसको पढ़ाने की कोशिश करेंगे। और इसमें आप लोगों का बहुत बड़ा सहयोग है। साथ में उन्होंने ये भी जोड़ा, क्योंकि ये चीज जो है वो हमें बहुत खुशी लगी, क्योंकि जो कोई भी हो, मतलब मिडिल क्लास फैमिली से नीचे के ये लोग बिलोंग करते हैं, और इसमें इस तरह से अपना मदर फादर अगर एक अच्छा एटीट्यूड रखते हैं तो वो अच्छा लगता है कि हाँ, उन्हें भी पढ़ाई का और कस्तूरबा गांधी का जो मतलब स्वतालीम से जुड़े बच्चों का एक भविष्य उन्हें उज्जवल नजर आता है, खासतौर से लड़कियों के प्रति। दूसरी बेटी सानिया है वहाँ, उसके पापा का नाम फारूक है। उन्होंने भी हमसे बोला कि हमारी बिटिया को बाइक चलाने का बहुत शौक है, तो वो क्या करती है कि जब भी स्कूल जाएगी तो सुबह जल्दी उठेगी, बाइक चलाएगी, उसके बाद स्कूल जाने को वो तैयार हो जाती है तुरंत, उसको ना नहीं करना है। इवन घर के काम भी होते हैं तो माँ भी कहीं सपोर्ट कर देती है कि नहीं, तुम्हें पहले अपना स्कूल का काम खत्म करना है और आपको स्कूल जाना है। वो लोग बेसब्री से इंतजार भी करते हैं, मदर फादर ही बोलते हैं कि कब आप स्कूल खोलेंगे और कब हम बच्चों को भेजें, जिससे कि आज के दौर में जो शिक्षा का एक हथियार है बच्चियों के लिए, वो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। तो इस बात को उनके मदर फादर भी अब बहुत बखूबी समझते हैं इस बात को। तो ये चीजें हमें खुद बहुत अच्छा लगा, दिल से बहुत अच्छा लगा। और लॉकडाउन में तो घर में फैमिली में तो फैमिली मेंबर्स रहते ही है, तो लेकिन इसके बावजूद जब ये समय निकाल के हमने उनसे जुड़ने का प्रयास किया, जो जुड़े हम, तो जो उनका पॉजिटिव विचार हमें समझ में आया मदर फादर का, क्योंकि वो लोग तो इतना एक एक फोन सबके पास, माँ इतनी ज्यादा शिक्षित नहीं है, तो लेकिन फिर भी अपने बच्चों की, खासतौर से लड़कियों की पढ़ाई के लिए वो बहुत एक अच्छा भविष्य देखना चाह रहे हैं, और साथ में ये चाह रहे हैं कि वो लोग आगे बढ़े बच्चे हमारे।
जी, शुक्रिया शुक्रिया इंदु जी। एंड मुझे लगता है कि ऐसे उदाहरण ही हम लोगों को भी प्रेरणा देते हैं, चाहे वो सानिया की कहानी हो,
हाँ, रुखसाना हो या
रुखसाना हो, सानिया हो,
जी,
और उसमें आई थिंक यही प्रेरणा को लेकर हम लोग आगे अच्छे से काम कर पाते हैं, और उससे अपने लिए भी एक उद्देश्य ढूंढ पाते हैं। तो शुक्रिया। My next question is for Anika. So Anika, you were a volunteer during your graduation time period, but then you went back like working in an MNC bank, uh, and you yourself came back, ki, hey, like I want to volunteer. Like, is there something for me? I just want to deep dive into the thought process that was going around, going into your mind, and what sort of led you to take that decision. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. So I think that after graduation, I never even thought that I wouldn't be volunteering anymore. It was something I just planned to do, and I guess I was waiting for someone to tell me what to do. And as I was working, I realized that, I mean, at that point, it's easy to feel like I can just continue this life on, right? Like I have money now, I can live on my own, everything is set. But it's so easy for me now that I've graduated, I got the education, but I guess you keep feeling that there's so many people who don't get lucky in that regard. And there's so many places people need help. And the fact that I do have this opportunity means I should be spending more time to like make sure other people can also come into this life and I guess succeed to the best of their abilities. And that's kind of why I think I reached out again and asked for more things to do. And there are many ways you can give back, I guess, in communities. And I mean, there's so many things you can do even in your own, like in your own home, right? You help out more. And there's so many ways to give back. But working with SwaTaleem through college, I think I realized a different perspective of how nonprofits work and creating such a sustainable system and working with girls who I guess really need someone to just guide them, to mentor, to support them. And for me, that cause is like above all. I mean, I always care about education and gender problems and issues. So once I had that door open and I'd gotten to learn about the organization, I thought that there's like nothing more I could do than give some of my time to at least try and help and make a little bit of an impact. So that's why I stayed. I guess as much as it may be like for you, it's also a lot for me. I get such a creative space to work and think and learn about everything that's happening and the, like many ways that the team is contributing to the cause. So that's why.
Yeah, like what I'm hearing here is that there is a mutual learning process. It's not just for the person you are interacting with, but also for oneself. And I think that sort of comes out as a big motivation to continue and learning with a purpose. That's what I'm hearing right now. And like, how would you find out time? Like, I'm very sure, like being in a professional space, like it becomes difficult to find that time. How would you sort of make out that time, or how would you go about that?
I think even in school, right, it's hard to find time. It's just a matter of wanting to do it. And if I can get so much out of it personally, like it's such a big reward and accomplishment. I think I feel more satisfaction after I like complete something here than I would at work. So I think that it's just I want to do it and I feel so good afterwards that I make the time. I just want it, so I do it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Anika. And I think that's a message like for all of us. Like if there is an intent, you will find out the time. And if this is something that is really important to you, you will make time for it. Thanks for sharing that. My next question would be for Anjali. So Anjali, you also worked uh, as a person who in capacity of your ELM working with girls at KGBV Jalmana. I would just want you to sort of share if you had certain experiences in the school that sort of gave you a different worldview in terms what you already had, and how that helped you in sort of shaping your journey further, or maybe just having those questions in your head regarding like how do I need to move forward with my life? If you can just share something on those lines.
Right. So there are a few things, and please just don't hesitate to tell me if I'm taking too long to answer. Um, some specific experiences from school were, uh, I mean, all of us from an urban setting do often understand. I mean, we're aware that education, a government education, is not of the best quality, and rural government education even more so. But I feel like until you really go on ground, you don't really understand the extent to which it lacks, and you don't really understand the stakes. I mean, when you're reading about it or when you're talking about it in your circles, then at the end of the day, students are just students, and teachers are just teachers, and the government is just a government. But you go there and you realize that these are eighth graders who have to teach their seventh and sixth grade juniors because they don't have teachers who show up to work. You go there and you realize that there are principals. I mean, you realize that there is a power struggle. There are relationships that need to be built. The principal doesn't want you to take up too much time as a volunteer, even though the volunteers are probably doing more work than is being done at the school. So there are a lot of things that really open your eyes to the fact that these kids are really getting short sold in education. Like, this is not what an education is supposed to look like for anybody, especially for these kids who have lots of potentials. Like, the stars are in their eyes, and there's no budget, or there's no commitment, or there are no people who are willing to show up for them. So I guess from that point of view, like, those things really stuck with me. That, it's very real, the extent of the problem, and yeah, it made me feel grateful, um, and more committed to being a part of the solution, I think. And that's when I sort of realized, one, that you really need to be there for this generation of learners to sort of give them, to help, to facilitate the way they will eventually become change makers, which is sort of why I'm working at a school, and also sort of why I'm still here. Like, this is, it's not much. I'm illustrating, I'm drawing, but it's something more than nothing at all. And these are crumbs. These are things I say to myself. There is so much more that can be done, so much more that I have to do. But that's sort of what I took away. So even in the fellowship, we study in Ashoka University, which is this university in one secluded corner of Haryana where everything's perfect, big classrooms, best of faculty, best of facilities. I feel like it was this huge bubble of privilege, and not 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 that one should treat such experiences as, like, reality checks, but that's sort of what it was. Like, you go out and you really do see that everybody's not in Ashoka, and feel like maybe we should hope that everybody should be. So yeah, that's what it was like for me.
Yeah, no, thank you, Anjali. And like, I take a lot of inspiration from what you said, is to just acknowledging the privilege that we hold, and doing something with it, or doing something about it, is something that I'm taking away from what you mentioned, and completely agree on having different worlds within, like, with Ashoka and just outside Ashoka. Yeah, thank you for that. And I would say, like, all of us have this on this panel, has this intent of contributing in whatever capacity we can, and I think that is really, really important. uh, yeah, and Kavya also agrees with it. Just to I'm also aware, and I'm also aware of your time and other commitments. I think we have sort of covered everyone's journey and what individual story that everyone has to tell. Like, it's a diverse group. Like, there are people from different nationality, there are people who speak different languages, there are people who are here, who are doing a job, then there are people who are studying right now, and yet somehow we are on this panel. And there is something that ties us together, and what I'm hearing all of you saying is, uh, I think it's questioning oneself about what we can give back, acknowledging our privilege, and being mindful of different realities that we have outside our own bubbles, and doing something about it. I think taking that one step is really important. And as Anika mentioned, that if you have the intent, you will find time for it. And it's not just about what we are giving to the community or to the space that we are facilitating, but a lot is given back to us in terms of सॉलिडारिटी. जैसे इंदू आंटी ने हमारे साथ साझा किया कि उस बातचीत के दौरान हमें भी अच्छा लगता है कि हम सिर्फ उनसे बातचीत नहीं कर रहे हैं उनके लिए, मगर हमें भी अच्छा लग रहा है कि हम 2-3 घंटे का समय निकाल के बातचीत कर रहे हैं. और as Shafaq shared that though there are differences, but then there are so many similarities between what she saw in Iran and what she saw here. So I think there is something that is binding this group together. So before we end this discussion, like, I would want all of you, like, in a line or two, any message that you would have for people out there who are thinking to volunteer for any cause, or who are thinking to take that decision that why I should volunteer. And not just with SwaTaleem, with anywhere in the world where they are right now. Like, just one line message for everyone. I think that would be really helpful. And we can go in any order you like. Yeah. So yeah. और मैं इसे एक बार ट्रांसलेट भी कर देता हूँ, क्योंकि इंदू जी भी हमारे साथ जुड़ी हुई हैं, कि बाहर जो भी ऐसे लोग हैं जो वॉलंटियरिंग करने का सोच रहे हैं, या उन्हें लगता है कि शायद मेरी दशा अभी मैं उस स्थिति में नहीं हूँ, या मुझे क्यों करना चाहिए, तो उनके लिए कोई भी 1 या 2 लाइन में आपका उनके लिए कोई मैसेज हो या कुछ भी आप बोलना चाहें, तो वो एक बार साझा कर दें, ताकि उस नोट पर हम इस पैनल डिस्कशन को एक एंड की तरफ ले जा सकें. And I think this time we can go alphabetical wise, if that is okay, because I'm also aware of the time. So maybe we can start with Anika. Yeah.
Sure. I think that whenever someone in general asks like whether or not they should volunteer, I think I would say like, why not? There's really no reason not to. It makes you feel good. You're helping somebody, and the community, whether or not it's directly, is also giving so much to you that it can only make you feel good. And you're also going to meet people and have fun. It's never not fun, right? So I would just ask like, why not?
Yeah. Thank you, Anika. Anjali, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just had a dog situation. I don't know what to say that everybody else hasn't already said, but just that it's very rewarding. It's very, the process of volunteering sort of makes you, it puts things into perspective. Like, you are here, you're like this little speck in this really huge space, and even then you have some power, but at the same time you're sort of still a part of this huge system. So I really value that about the experience of volunteering, and I'm glad you still let me do it. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So Anjali, we are just facilitating the process. We don't have anything to do with it. But thank you for being so humble about your experience. And we can go next. Auntie, आप जाना चाहेंगी? इंदु जी, हाँ, आप म्यूट पे हैं।
देखिए, 2 लाइनें बोल देती हूँ, फिर मैं थोड़ा निकलना चाहूंगी। जो वॉलंटियर्स हैं, जो अपनी संतुष्टि के लिए भी, और जो हम देखते हैं कि कुछ समस्याओं का अगर हम थोड़ा सा उनमें समाधान के लिए योगदान दे सकें, तो इसे जरूर करना चाहिए। और दूसरा ये है कि हमें जो अपने समझाने के तरीके होते हैं, अगर हम उन्हें बताएं तो उन्हें भी अच्छा लगे और हमको भी अच्छा लगे। तो हम इसके दौरान कोई भी हो, कहीं भी हो, कोई जरूरी नहीं है कि हम शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में ही हो, आसपास के वातावरण में भी, आसपास के जो और भी बच्चे हैं साथ में, अगर हम जुड़ते हैं तो उनका भी हम अगर समाधान करते हैं तो ये बहुत अच्छी बात है। और हमारा प्रयास रहेगा कि हम इसमें निरंतर जुड़े रहें, क्योंकि एक अपने लिए आत्म संतुष्टि का एक बहुत बड़ा जरिया है। और वॉलंटियर्स के लिए चीयर अप हमेशा उनके लिए, क्योंकि वो भी अपना एक बहुमूल्य योगदान देते हैं, एक विश्वास करते हैं। और दूसरी बात ये है कि वो एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का फेस होते हैं वॉलंटियर्स, तो उनके लिए चेयर्स अप तो बनता है। बाकी शुक्रिया आप लोगों का, सबका, जो हमें जोड़ा और कुछ अपना साझा करने के लिए भी रखा, कुछ हमने आपसे भी सीखा, इसके लिए भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपका।
नो, धन्यवाद आपका इंदु जी। और आपने ठीक कहा कि सभी वॉलंटियर्स के लिए थम्स अप बनता है। और बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण बात है कि सिर्फ संस्था उनमें भरोसा नहीं दिखा रही, वो संस्था में एक बहुत बड़ा भरोसा
हाँ,
दिखा रही है।
बहुत बड़ा भरोसा दिखाते हैं।
दैट
तो
नीड्स टू बी रिस्पेक्टेड।
बिल्कुल, इसकी वजह से हम लोग जैसे हैं, हम लोग हैं, एक विश्वास के द्वारा हम आगे बढ़ते हैं। फिर जो हम जुड़ते हैं, जिस परिवेश में जिनसे हम बातें करते हैं, बच्चों के फैमिली से सब, तो वो हम पे फेथ रखते हैं, तो ये अच्छा लगता है। एक कड़ी, एक पुल का काम करती है, जो आगे बढ़ने का काम देती है वो। तो इसलिए चेयर अप तो बनता है आप लोगों के लिए भी, सभी के लिए जितने लोग हैं।
जी जी, शुक्रिया। Next, Kavya, would you want to share? Okay.
Yeah, so agree with everyone else. Top 3 things very quickly. Firstly, learn, hold yourself accountable when you're going to a new organization, a new team. Don't take it very casually. I'm just volunteering. There are no strict ties. Hold yourself accountable. There are actual human beings you're working with. So learn whatever the thing is. Second, don't fall into the savior complex. Often, especially when people like us are coming from privilege, we can fall into the complex, oh, we're doing something for them, but we're doing something together. So just remember that, remind that to yourself again and again. Be empathetic, practice empathy. Third, don't be afraid. Once you're oriented, once you know the ethics of the team, try to step forward and take your own initiative, work hard, try creative stuff, try doing new things, and you'll really enjoy it.
Thank you, Kavya, for being so precise and like learn empathy. And I think really important of holding oneself accountable. Sometimes like this thing can come up, if I'm volunteering, I can just not follow the same rules that other people are following. So thank you so much for saying that out. Yeah, Shafak, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I think what I wanted to say, like almost everyone mentioned that. So I just wanted to say, don't be afraid of like doing something, doing a volunteer work. You always have something to bring to the like organization or the NGO or whatever, wherever that you want to do the volunteer work. And there's always something to learn. So even if it's something different from whatever that your job is or your field is, even working with other people, you learn teamwork, you learn connectedness. And so I think that's how the world works. So it's like people helping out each other. And so I think there's always something in it for people. And I think I want to also kind of mention what Kavya mentioned. It's like don't be afraid of like coming to an organization and you always like have something to give them and have something to get from that. So it's like, yeah, it's always rewarding. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Shafat. Thank you for saying that. Surbhi, last but not the least, any concluding comments? Yeah.
Nothing new than what everyone said. So like, I just want to highlight just a few things. So again, like Kavya and Shafak said, I think it's so important to like just, or let me backtrack to what Anika said before. So like, why volunteer? Why not? Like, that's what I would say to people who would come up to me and they're like, okay, like maybe we're not getting any like monetary compensation from volunteering, you know, like what do we do then? But you are also in the business of doing good, if you're going to think of it from that aspect. So I feel like that's also really important. Like, you're doing good, why wouldn't you want to do good? And secondly, again, you're in it to learn, take accountability, you're learning more about yourself, you're, you know, learning about other people, you're helping other people, and you're also helping yourself. And I think that is super rewarding, at least for me, and I hope it is for other people too. So I think that would be like my main advice to people who would come up to me and be like, so why should I volunteer? And just to conclude, like Anika said, why not? But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Surbhi, for concluding it on such a high note. I just want to say thanks to all of you for coming and joining us in this panel discussion. Thank you, everyone. And we would want to move on to our next segment of this session, where we have Ananya, who would be going into the panel discussion with Aarti ji and Ravi Bhaiya. So over to Ananya, and thank you so much for joining us in this panel discussion. Stay connected, keep volunteering, and yeah, stay safe. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Vaibhav, and thank you so much to our wonderful volunteers. It was a delight to listen to you. And as always, we are immensely grateful for all the contributions, all the work that you've done for us. I'm very fortunate to have two very special guests here, Aarti Madhusudan and Ravi Gulati, and a little about them, and then we would love to have a discussion with them. And so Aarti Madhusudan is an alumna of TIS Mumbai and NIMHANS Bangalore. And she runs Government Counts, an initiative that helps nonprofits build effective boards, as well as associated with Whiteboard. It's a volunteer-led initiative that brings senior corporate professionals to provide pro bono strategic guidance. And also volunteers with Dan Utsav, which is one of the biggest fundraising drive here. And then with her, we have Ravi Gulati, or Ravi Bhaiya. And he has an interesting life story. So I would just like to reiterate that here. So he finished his management studies. He went to Canada, quit his 8-month-old job, and came back to India to establish Manzil. We will also be putting links in the chat. And so you can follow up each of these links and names that I'm taking right now. And so Manzil is a learning space for children from economically challenging backgrounds. And after volunteering for 24 years now, he has been promoted to the chief executive volunteer of the Manzil family, which today has more than 20,000 alumni. So thanks a lot. And before really beginning, you both have had such huge spans, and your career and your life has revolved around volunteering in so many aspects. How did you land up in this space, and what was your inspiration to volunteer in the first place? And then also, according to you, what is the core of volunteering? If you have to sum that up in short. So we can begin with you, Aarti, if you want to go first.
Thank you, Ananya. Delighted to meet you, Ravi. I've heard so much about you. Thank you, Ananya, for bringing us together. And hello, everybody. So Ananya, for me, I think I just grew up with it. You know, the kind of schools that I went to, my parents were very particular that my sister and I should study in a certain kind of school. And back in the day, they were the good old Catholic run convent schools, right? And so for us, growing up in those schools, right from grade one, I think we had no choice, right? Just as we studied history, geography, English, math, and science, we volunteered. And I remember, it would be very, very simple things like every Friday, you're expected to bring an extra dabba from tiffin from home. And, the sisters would take you class by class to go and serve people who would be sitting on the streets hungry. And so you just grew up with it, right? And going forward, we would go to homes for the elderly, and back in the day, write postcards. It was a way to improve your handwriting, they would say, but you wrote letters for the elderly. And I think just the process of doing that when you're in third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, when you're writing a letter on behalf of an elderly person, writing to her son or his daughter, where they're expressing the fact that they're missing them and they wish they were together, it just very subconsciously builds in you, empathy, and in you an understanding of what life could have possibly been. I think the really good thing that happened with me, and I think I've just been, very, very fortunate. I consider myself to be one of the luckiest people born. It was the fact that after every encounter that we had, we would have some self-reflection, and age was never a barrier to that. So we would always have Sister Justa Maria, who was her name. She was a German nun. I remember 40 years ago, would sit and say, what did you feel like after you did this activity, right? And you could say you were very tired. You could say that you didn't enjoy it, but it got you to reflect on that action, right? And so I think for me, I just grew up thinking, well, this is what everybody does, so what's strange or what's new, or why should it be something that has to be thought about separately? I mean, just like we went to school and studied and you played in the evening with your friends, you volunteered. And so that is for me how the journey, honestly began.
Ravi,
And stayed.
yeah.
So likewise, thanks Ananya and SwaTaleem that you introduced me to Aarti and heard about you, but didn't get a chance. And we need these chance encounters. Yeah, I mean something similar for me as well, but also a little different. I जैसे कहते हैं ना होश संभाला. I kind of really, I mean, before I understood the world, it was already happening. My mother was volunteering. And that was very unusual in my family circle. My mother was also volunteering because of my special sister. I have a 7-year elder sister, 7 years older than me, who's special. And I won't go into the details, but to sort of support her learning, she started to volunteer. But by the time I kind of understood what's happening in the world, I saw both my parents stepping out of the house to work. One was earning, the other was not earning any money. So I think from early on, without even thinking how it seeps in, certain values seep into you, I de-linked work from money. Work has nothing to do with money. Work is its own meaning. Of course, we humans have set up a whole sort of system over all these years, centuries, where money is how we sort of cooperate with each other. Money is the instrument we use. I love to ask this question sometimes: is money necessary for survival? People understand it's a trick question, so they'll go like, yeah, no. But really the trick lies elsewhere. We are the only one species out of trillions of species that need this instrument for exchange. Everything else in nature is exchanging without using this instrument. It doesn't have it. It has not created it, right? So it's a very artificial thing. We live so much in it that like Matrix, we may start to feel that it's the real thing when the real thing is underlying it. So I guess what happened for me was that got de-linked. I always had these, I didn't have too much of, I have a very strange relationship with money itself. So what is the difference between volunteering and doing professional work, paid professional work? It's essentially money. Otherwise, it can be exactly the same. In fact, volunteering opens up your vistas to do things that can't afford to pay. The absurd thing about money is that things that need human intelligence, energy, may not have the ability to pay. Whereas things that don't need human intelligence and energy may have money to pay. So where is human energy going? There's a mismatch that happens because of this distinction that we keep forgetting between demand and need, right? Economics, they say very clearly, there's a need, there's a willingness to pay, there's an ability to pay. Only then there is demand. So there are things that have needs. The needs are very important. Saving the planet, climate change, work there is very important. We may not be able to convert it into a demand because we may not be able to pay for it. We may not be able to pay for just planting trees. One of my big inspirations, this man who died recently at the age of about 95. And for 60 years, all he did since he was 25 to 85, that 60 years range, he was just planting trees. And you can still go to his village and see like lakhs and lakhs of fully grown trees only planted by a single man. Volunteering, right? Was not paid for it. Did the earth not need it? Did human beings not need it? Of course we need it. Were we willing to, somebody willing to pay for it? Nobody willing to pay for it. So will the work not get done if people can't pay for it? I think if we can de-link this thing, of course everybody needs money, but do we need so much of it? Do we need it at all stages of our lives? Can we have a way of earning what we need at some point and keeping some time for doing things that we really value, care about? I think those are the questions that came to me looking at my mother and what she was doing. And so it was for me a very natural way of, after my work. So when I worked in Canada for 8 months, I saved up so much that I didn't need money for the next 8 years. So cool, I'm free. I can volunteer because that's freedom for me, right? So that's my little story.
Right. Thank you, both of you. And this was, I think both of you brought really strong connects with childhood experiences of various sorts, but also this idea of very deep self-reflection. And that helps us also. I mean, we also are growing and we are evolving as people. So it also shares a glimpse of, how philosophically you approach this idea of volunteering. And actually, one of my questions was for, in your experience, how do you compare employees versus volunteers? A lot of times organizations are not interested in investing so much in volunteers, right? And like, yeah, Ravi Bhaiya, you touched on it. And I wanted to go back to Aarti to see if you have any thoughts on this particular topic, because you work with organizations, various organizations.
Yeah, Ananya, and we spoke briefly, recently on this, right? I think organizations in the nonprofit space, strangely, seem to take employees more seriously than they take volunteers. I think it sort of connects back to what Ravi just said, right? Because there is a financial linkage between an employee and the work that she or he does, whereas that doesn't exist with volunteers. Again, from personal experience, my very serious professional work started by volunteering. So, 15 years ago, or maybe around that time, I started volunteering with a fairly well-known organization today, and it had just been started back then. And one of the reasons I started to volunteer was because I was a young mother and I was really, just bored changing diapers. And, I just needed to feel validated and feel valued, that I could do something beyond looking after my child. And here I was, this person from TIS and from NIMANS and all of these things that very stupidly gets to your head, right? Back then. And so I started volunteering with this organization, and within a couple of years, started to lead an SBU over there, right? And the person, who ran the organization said to me very clearly that, look, we are very serious about what you're going to be doing, right? And you have to be as accountable to us as an employee might be, if not more, right? So be very clear that if you're not able to send a daily report, you can leave. I mean, we don't want you. There were many people, I think at that point, who said, why are you killing yourself? I mean, you're not even getting paid, right? And you're sitting after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, after your kids are back from school, and you're sweating it after 10 p.m. because you need to send this daily report to somebody who is not paying you a penny, right? But you know what it did to me, Ananya? It made me feel taken really very seriously. Okay. And I think that is very, very important, right? And that, I think, changed my entire perspective on how we should treat volunteers. I think there are different motivations for which somebody might volunteer, but this taking seriously bit is critical and the center of it, right? Because you then realize not just the value that you're adding to the organization, but also to yourself in that process, right? You become more confident. A lot of the other points were alluded to by your young volunteers earlier, right? But apart from that, you take yourself more seriously, more than anything else, right? And I know at the time that I, left volunteering there, I think 4 of the SBOs were all led by volunteers, which was phenomenal. And we had employees reporting to us. I think it was probably one of the first few organizations ever that was happening, right? So I feel that organizations need to invest a lot more in volunteers than they might in employees, because I think you create role models in some way, right, within the organization. And while learning is always mutual, we do learn from one another. I think you tend to create more inspiration if you take your volunteers more seriously and give them serious things to do.
Right, right. Very, very interesting how, we are always thinking that, employees are more valuable because they are valued in terms of money. But there are also these aspects that volunteers and strong, committed volunteers can be role models, or they have skills that maybe even money cannot match. And that is a very interesting perspective to take. I wanted to come to Ravi Bhaiya and wanted to understand, and this comes from a recent discussion we were having as well. So there are big, really well settled, old, established non-profit organizations, and then there are small, growing organizations in non-profits. In your experience, like, when would people choose one over the other, and what are their motivators or factors as to why people might choose to go for bigger or smaller? And also I think they also offer different things to people, and so not everything that we can get in a small growing organization will be matched by a larger organization. And because these are important factors that people consider while they are choosing to volunteer. And so I wanted to hear from you what your observations have been so far.
See, Aarti was also mentioning it. People volunteer for different reasons. It could be, self at a very sort of getting admission in a foreign university level, self-learning level. It could be guilt. It could be empathy. It could be connecting to a cause that, you don't know how to, some of the volunteers have shared, that you would really like to do something about. So there are all different kinds of reasons. And I think your choice would also depend on those reasons, because that's a wide range of reasons. So large organizations have this thing of being better known. So when you're not really connected with the world of NGOs and you're sort of away from that, like I was growing up, no clue about it, right? I only first heard about it when I was already 21 years old. And we're talking of way back in 1990. So at that point, what would you hear of? You would hear of the larger organizations. You would not hear of the smaller organizations. So in some ways, that's what you know. So therefore you go there, right? It's also beneficial because when you talk about you work there, people don't have a recognition issue. They know there's a credibility, you work there. So if you're, that's the reason. But I feel that if you really want to get into the issue and understand it, then maybe a smaller organization is a more suitable one for you. One, you can make a bigger difference. Two, one other connection I'll make with your previous question is that the reason why they're not, volunteers are not valued as much as employees. And I love the imagery that Aarti just made of employees reporting to volunteers. Why not? It's about the work that creates reporting relationships, not money, right? Can we keep money out of the equation? Just to see in terms of the work. So anyway, but coming back to this, volunteers, the perspective shift that needs to happen is volunteers are actually donors. Because what would you do with money?
Yeah.
You'd pay salaries to get some work done. And here they're doing it directly rather than doing it indirectly. They're doing that work for you without taking that salary. So they're donors. And they're donors of time, for God's sake, because time everybody has only an X amount. So there's nobody richer or poorer. Whereas when somebody is donating, which is a more valuable donation, 100 rupees or 100,000 rupees? From the point of view of the organization, 100,000 obviously, but from the point of view of the donor, it's about who has how much, what proportion of their wealth are they giving away. So somebody has only, a 5,000 rupees a month job and giving away 100 rupees a month. It's probably more valuable, right? So valuing things as opposed to pricing things. There's again this other confusion we have all the time: price versus value. So, okay, diamond has a higher price, not necessarily a higher value than water, right? If you're dying. So not equating value with price, right? So if we see volunteers as donors, then who values these donors also more? Generally smaller organizations, because the larger organizations, they have budgets running into crores. Small donations from individuals are lost there. But in a small organization, they can really bring in something that they would otherwise not get at all, may not get at all, that kind of thing. I mean, if I take Manzil's example, almost every volunteer who's committed, who's come in, has brought in things that I would otherwise not get. I would not pay for it and get it. I would just do without it, right? Rather than, so they're extremely valuable. And I think when you're valuable and you can see that you're valuable to the organization, that has so much more meaning to you. So I would say there are various reasons to choose one over the other. But the first thing is you need to even know of different organizations, and that you need to do some research for. Thankfully, today with the internet, it's much easier to do that research than earlier. In my time, you only heard what you read in the paper, and paper would not cover everything. So there is, I think those are the things that come in the sort of big versus small. The other thing I would say, one other important one, that it's not sufficient who values you, but they also have to be organized to show that they value you. So sometimes a large organization can organize itself to show that they value you and to create that space for you. I think of Spick McKay as one such organization, entirely volunteer run, very large, and also has a high budget, but they're able to organize themselves. And maybe it's also the nature of your activity. I think that's also very important, because if you are trying to do work that requires sustained engagement in community, and a volunteer wants to come and take that up, as an organization, I would want to be sure of your, will you sustain with me, or are you going to go away very fast? And this is also something cultural I have to bring in here. There's a cultural thing where generally people think I'm volunteering and I've got these 20 other things and they're all my responsibility. I also have to earn money, I have to do school and all that. Where does volunteering lie in your importance? Because you're not being paid, often it's at the lowest end. So whenever you need time, that's the first thing that's, thrown out of your day. And that, if I know that your word, if you've committed for a year and you could suddenly say, I have a problem, what can I do? I need to leave in 2 months. Then how would I be able to rely on that person? So there is an issue, and that's a very cultural in my experience. People from cultures that value their word a lot, generally not in India, they keep their word because they've said it. I can't back out. Whereas people in India say, but you have to understand, I have a problem. The expectation is the other way. And this is generalized, of course. I've had volunteers who've been with me like for 10 years. I'm volunteering for 10 years. That's like a high amount of commitment. And all stereotyping is dangerous. But within that culture, when organizations operate, they'll find it harder to give them core work.
Yeah, I think very, very interesting and important points. And my next set of 2 questions are actually built on both these equations when it comes to sustaining volunteer engagement. And there are things that volunteers must keep in mind and do. And then there are things that organizations must do and keep in mind. And so this is actually a question to both of you. What is it that volunteers should keep in mind? And it happens. We've also had volunteers who have committed and then because of unforeseen reasons had to back out. And it's always important to remember that you can come back again anytime. These are open opportunities, but you probably can have a better estimate of your time and involvement and engagement that you can have. Similarly, I wanted to bring up the other side of the coin, which is to do with organizations. Generally, we see how our tasks allocated to volunteers. It's done on a basis that whatever is left is given to volunteers. So again, this entire idea of not valuing or taking volunteers seriously. So what can organizations do on that front to retain volunteers, to sustain them? And similarly, what is it that volunteers can keep in mind, especially for people who have approached us, who said that we want to volunteer in future, and maybe these can be certain things they can prepare about, maybe research a bit on the organizations, and then decide to go into that act of service?
Yeah, so I think my biggest learning has been that we've got to move from what I call a transactional approach to a transformational approach, right? And I believe that organizations must offer volunteering as an opportunity for the volunteer, okay? And that is critical. I mean, you've heard all the young people who came before us say that, right? That it does something to the person who is volunteering. But I think when organizations reach out, it is always an ask for a particular activity which has a limited, I mean, it's finite in that sense. Okay, will you help make an annual report? Will you do my designing? Will you go, take care of my social media, right? And all of that, too, in my mind, is an outcome, right? I think we need to create what I call dream holders with us, right? They're partners. I mean, you want them to share in your dream, and you want them to share in the change that you want to bring about, right? Only then will somebody be inspired to say that, I have 3 hours, I'm not going to go on Netflix and binge watch a serial, but I will take the time out and I'll, do what I can because it's good for me, right? And this realization always seems to be articulated at the end of the volunteering journey. It's never used enough by organizations, right? And so I would say that if you're a nonprofit, and you will see it on the website at volunteer with us, I'm saying I would change the communication entirely. So here's an opportunity. I mean, what can be a better thing than to say that here's an opportunity to be a better human being, right? I mean, and say it as simply as that, right? And not, get into any profanities at all of any nature, right? So, so that is one. And in terms of sustaining, again, Ananya, I think just checking back. I mean, is this adding value to you, right? Because let's face it, if I'm having fun doing something, I will continue to do it, no matter what it is, right? I mean, take running, for example. Okay? It's a very painful thing. I hate running. I'll never run or walk, right? But I know it's got a benefit to my health, to keep my cholesterol down or my heart healthier or whatever. So I will do it, right? Because I'm aware of the benefits, right? Then it becomes habit for me after that. Then you don't think about kiske liye kya fayda hai, right? Do it because, and we've got to make volunteering habit forming. Some cultures have done it, and they've done it reasonably well. Even within the country, you have spiritual organizations that have done it, right? And I think for me that the biggest learning comes from that, right? Why is somebody a follower of a particular guru or a spiritual head? It's not because they think the spiritual head is getting something out of it, right? It's because they're getting something out of it themselves, right? I think that's something that we need to use very consciously. And I think hopefully that will make a huge difference to the numbers of people who will volunteer.
Ravi Bhaiya?
Yeah, similar things. I think volunteering is one of those things which has benefits for both the organization and the volunteers. It's a win-win, right? And therefore, it's if it's done from the point of view, from the organization point of view, because they are the ones who are trying to encourage volunteering, right? They're saying if there were more volunteers, if they were to understand the volunteers, almost like businesses understand their clients, right? What are they looking for? There's no harm because it's not like, unlike clients where you're doing it for the clients only. Here, it's a real win-win for both, and win-win in many ways. It's so another aspect of this transaction versus transformation is, and transaction is generally a short-term kind of a myopic view. Anybody has every day-to-day work, you get into transaction, but not to lose sight of the larger thing. It's another aspect of it is this organization versus ecosystem. So for example, if we think of just my organization, I may be even more transactional, even though that doesn't make so much sense for the larger cause, even what the organization is doing. But if I'm looking at the cause itself, the person who gets transformed will contribute in their lives to the cause in so many unpredictable ways that you can't even imagine right now, right? This is not linear. This is not cause and effect that you can identify like that. So you're making a better world in ways that you don't even know. So therefore, transformation is so valuable here, and the person has come to you, and often it is at a young age. So you have a long life ahead to make all these kind of changes, and generally your volunteers are your best ambassadors, even more than your employees. If they've had a great experience for life, they'll be talking about it, and they'll be doing all kinds of things, and then also in the ecosystem. So I think if organizations can really question something, this confusion between value and price, which comes to us like because we're not thinking about it. There is no price being paid for them, so the value is lower. Therefore, you're not thinking about them. Therefore, you're giving them the leftover work. So you actually, wasting a very high resource. Imagine somebody not wanting money. How much other stuff would be of value there that you're not, recognizing as tangible that they're coming for? Whereas the person who's getting money, you don't know what, there may be nothing else they're coming for. A salaried employee is saying, I'm here only for the money, right? I know from my own mother's experience that she was doing this because of her special daughter, and she was going to a special school, which was a government aided school. So everybody was like, how we think of the government, you work only as little as you need to do. And here my mother was even teaching, doing music in recess with the children. And the others would say, "Aapko aur paise nahi milne wale, why are you bothering to do this?" But she would do it because she was not doing it for money. They couldn't even understand what could be her, draw to that. So that's a very high quality of motivation. Don't we want motivated employees in our organization? And an organization is only as good as the motivated people in it, right? Whatever the cause, whatever the amount of money. And who would be more motivated than a volunteer who's not even getting that money which everybody needs? So they're actually at the top. They should be getting the best work, of course, with the other things that are they committed? Are they going to be there for a long time? All of those things are there. So that flipping has to be done. When people do that flip, then they'll work too. Now we talk of employees are clients. You have to retain the best employees. That conversation has already come in business organizations. I think it's already seeped into good non-profits as well. Because you are as good as the people who are working for you. And why would you not value somebody who's got this intrinsic motivation? Right? I think it's just short-termism to look at it as transactional. It can also be an issue in a larger organization. The people who are moved by the cause become a minority. And a lot of people there it's just a job.
Right.
And if volunteers are in touch with those people, what kind of work would they pass on? So there's no working in that space. That energy is missing. So there's the connection that you need to make with the people who are really inspired about the work that they're doing. I think this needs work at both ends. Of course, I'm not repeating the work that needs to happen at the end of the volunteers, because they should be also ready to be sort of tested out. So it takes energy and time for an organization to involve volunteers. I've had situations where I now want to meet volunteers coming to Manzil, even though we're not a large organization. I want to meet volunteers coming to Manzil only after they've spent some time here. And on day one, I will not meet them. And the reason is I spend a lot of time, and then if they're just gone like 5 days later, and that happens a lot. Not only that, sometimes people write to us an email and saying, I want to volunteer, and they can't make the time to have the first meeting. After 5 or 6 attempts, we give up. This is a non-serious person. Maybe they had a very strong intent, but they're not connecting intent with making it real in their life, making the space for it. It can't be just a sentiment. So that work has to be done at that level, and I think they will affect each other. So if organizations have good experience with volunteers, they'll get influenced, and they'll be, start to rethink their attitude towards volunteers. So we can actually influence each other. Organizations can influence volunteers, and volunteers can influence organizations. And I think the work has to be done at both ends.
I just want to add to what Ravi said, Ananya, and I think it's an important point, right? I think what we're forgetting is that people tend to be at different stages in their journeys, right? Of what they want from life, what they want from, even volunteering, right? And I sometimes feel that as organizations, we have this one size fits all kind of opportunities that are there. And I can understand it might be important. I mean, you're not, you can't afford to curate for every single volunteer, right? But I think just being mindful and recognizing what stage the volunteer is in her or his journey of wanting to contribute, give back to herself or to society is important in figuring out the kind of things that you want them to do also, right? And I think one of the things I've learned, and I'm not a, personally, I'm very bad with giving negative feedback, but I've learned that sometimes it's important to tell a volunteer who doesn't show up that they've let you down. I mean, as simply as that, right? What we tend to do is to become, we go silent. I've done it myself. अच्छा उसने मेल का जवाब नहीं दिया, so let it be, right? But I think in the recent past, I've started writing back saying that I'm really disappointed. I mean, you didn't even have the courtesy to, acknowledge this mail or, whatever, right? I think that's important. It's important for both the organization and it sends a very strong message to others around because people will hear कि अच्छा ऐसा mail जाता है, and then anybody else who's working with volunteers or who wants to volunteer will also take that action of volunteering far more seriously. I mean, you would do that to an employee, wouldn't you? If they didn't respond, you'd pull them up, right? So why should a person who is literally wasted your time not be, right?
Right. I think I'm hearing a lot of like strong thread of how do you build a culture of accountability on both ends. And also the second part, which I also resonate with a lot, is volunteers are your seeds. So they will bloom at different periods in time and you may not even know when and where that will happen. And they will come back to you if they've had a good time and enriching time with you. I wanted to push this conversation to a different kind of volunteering space, which is the boards of nonprofits. And if you see those, the way they are constructed, essentially you have people who have a lot of experience and credibility, maybe in similar or different fields, and who have assembled to sort of mentor nonprofit organizations. But essentially, it is volunteering of a kind. It's volunteering of a sort. So how does power dynamics come into play? And then also, how do we manage power dynamics in that kind of volunteering space? Because it is different from the spaces we have been talking about so far.
Ravi, do you want to take that first? If I start, then I will go on till 10 o'clock. But
yeah, I don't know. I have a so I think the way it's, I don't know how, there's a range of things that are happening in NGOs. I think this whole requirement of having 7, if you're a society, 7 board members, and often, it's just we get people there and most of them are not involved. And then again, it's the same thing. We think they're there as a board, but they're not really coming forward and doing anything, and therefore you don't bother, and somebody has taken the lead in doing it, so they continue doing it. And then they're saying that you never involve us. So I think there's a large number of organizations where that happens. I think that's changing now, where people are looking at boards more seriously, not just filling up the 7 seats, and looking at people who can really add value to the cause at that level. But again, with people there, it's time is a big issue. You get more credible, more known people, and they're in too many things. And I feel there's a lot we need to, I think, still need to figure out how to make that really happen the way it's supposed to happen. They're supposed to give direction to the organization, for God's sake. It's a very sort of very, very important role, and they're volunteers. So it's not even seen as, I mean, your question itself would be seen as, oh, okay, so you're talking about them as volunteers? Yes, of course they are. There's no monetary this thing, right? Because somewhere the whole volunteering bit is about that, as we said, the pecking order, and there it is not there, it's there. But yeah, we can't, we have to.
Did we lose him?
I think so.
We recently had, half our board members resigning, saying, they were all also very old. So they were saying, we're busy with other things. But I think a lot had to do also with not feeling connected with the organization. I'm being very frank here. And we've got 4 new people. And this time it's been a lot of communication. This is as recent as March. So I don't know if I can answer this with any level of experience. I'm only stepping onto that space. I think, Aarti, you should come in and you.
Okay. So I have come a full circle in my understanding of how boards, work in India. And I've done a little bit of work in the West. And I think that the plug and play is not going to work for us at all. And I'm saying this in a public sort of place here. I, for example, don't believe in this whole obsession around founders and succession plan and all of that, honestly, right? I think that if a founder wants to run the organization till their dying day, it's their choice, and so be it, and they'll do a good job, and they should carry on, right? Other people can engage or not engage, and that's up to them. We do not have enough evidence in India, and I'm trying to find it, of organizations that, where the founders have moved on voluntarily, are still alive, and those organizations have done really as well. There are a few, but I think the numbers would be less than 100, right? So what are we talking about, right? The second point I want to make is that assuming that, a founder is asked to leave or leaves or dies or goes away, I doubt very much whether the people they work with are going to go and jump into the ocean. Very unlikely. Right? People will find their own ways of surviving, right? I mean, that's what human beings are naturally like that, right? Having said that, are boards important? Of course they are, right? Because you do need a group of people to enable the organization to pursue its mission and vision and for what it was set out to doing, right? But I think what I'm learning more and more, Ananya, is that the group of people that comes together must help the founder or the chief executive in the manner that they choose to be helped, right? So if you have, and there are a lot of other things, elements that one needs to consider, right? There's the life stage of the organization, there's the vision of the founder, how long the founder or the chief executive wants to continue, what role do they want to play, so on and so forth, right? But having said all of that, I think this group needs to sit down and really talk to they need to talk with each other to say, how do you want us to be involved? And one shouldn't judge it if the founder were to say, I just want you to, help with compliance. There's nothing wrong with that. For some reason in our heads, we seem to think that, the board must be doing doing other things, right? My question is why, right? If everything is done within the legal and, the compliance framework, and there are checks and balances for that, it's all very well for the board to just play a compliance role, right? The second point I want to make is that when certain types of people, get onto board positions, and I've seen this happen, especially with smaller organizations or mid-level organizations, right? Where they're hungry for help, there's a belief that you need people of a certain stature or a certain, background onto the board because it will lend credibility, which I don't think that's entirely true, but nevertheless, right? The power dynamic that you spoke about can be very, very hurtful, right? Because here you have this individual who's been to this Indian, American Ivy League type of organization, has worked with a large consulting firm, has maybe incubated and supported and donated to 20 other organizations, but suddenly comes in believing that they know it all, they know everything about everything. Okay, and I think that's not true. They just know different things to you, right? And I think it's very important, no matter who the individual is, to drive that point across, right? And not to disrespect what they know, not at all. I'm just saying, but to draw attention to the fact that your experiences are great, but they're different to my experiences, and we will both add value to each other. Right? And I'll give you one example. 2 years ago, I had this, bee in my bonnet saying that we don't, as a class of people, while we speak and talk about, wanting to do stuff in the social sector, we don't really know enough about the communities that we work in. Not all of us do, some do, and some do a lot more. So I started something called Dine and Dialogue, okay, which was essentially to say to a group of people, random people, let's have dinner with different communities, okay? And I'm not going to, obviously this was done through the help of friends who ran NGOs in those communities, but it was to say to them that we're not going to pay them to feed us or anything. We'll just go to their homes and have dinner with them, whatever they're eating. Okay, so one of these communities was a group of people who worked in the crematorium or the burial ground, right? I mean, I'd never been to one. And so, and in my head, and the reason I'm saying this, Ananya, is no matter, what experience I may have had, what learning I may have had, we are always a victim of our own biases and prejudices, okay? And it's very important to be mindful of that. And so in my head, the bias was that, gosh, to work in a crematorium or a burial ground is probably the worst job that one can have, right? Because every day this family is waking up hoping that somebody is dead, ki mera pet bharega. So this was that, I had that attitude in my head. And very patronizing, I think I must have been, when I started facilitating the conversation at dinner and spoke to this lady and said, oh, we're so grateful to be here. This must probably be the worst job. And, how do you do it? And tell us more and yada, yada, right? She gave me a look, and this is an unpaired woman, right? She gave me a look and she said, what makes you think this is the worst job? This is the best job that one can have, right? It completely threw me, right? How can cremating or burying dead bodies day after day be the best job, right? And you know what she said? She said, because in this is a job, if I don't do my job well, right, I am not going to be able to provide closure to the family that has come here. Okay? And of course, she said this in Tamil or whatever, right? And she said, when I hand over the burning stick to the son or the father or the, whoever to light the fire, I'm saying, Abhi, this chapter is over. Okay, move on, right? And, it was such a moment of profound learning for me, right? I would have never thought about it. And I think none of the people there would have ever thought about it in that way at all. We had one of the people who was there in the group who started crying, very moved, and he was an IT professional. And he said, the first thing I'm going to go and do is to not complain about my job anymore. I just have to learn how to appreciate it more, right? And he was on the board. He ended up being on the board of another organization. The point I'm trying to make is that if we are able to communicate to our boards and board members, right, who come in with a lot of wisdom and expertise, and I'm not at all trivializing that its relevance is best understood when there is great empathy of experience, then I think the organization lead is also able to push back. And the other thing I find disturbing is that a lot of founders and young organizations, right, don't seem to stand up to these people when they're making these, 25,000 feet recommendations. And I wish there was a way that we could encourage young people to stand up and say, boss, this may work in a McKinsey or a BCG or a Bates, it won't work here, right? And we need to do something about that. Right? And I'm not saying this is true of everybody. Of course, there are very sensitive and empathetic and kind people, but I think I'm finding that there is equally a percentage that comes with this, oh, I am this corporate professional of 25 years and I know it all, right? They know different things. Sorry, that's a very long answer, but I feel very heated about this. So.
No, thank you. I think some points are really like food for thought for us. And we are also very new and young in our journey. But I think we must try our best to make these spaces equal spaces too. Because it is essentially whatever, discussions happen in boardrooms, it does trickle down on ground. So it is getting it is flowing out of that room and affecting the interaction we are having with people on ground. So I do want to come to the end of this session. And there are really lots and lots of points, but I wanted to just gather from both of you any last thoughts that you have. And I also wanted to bring up the context of the space and time we are at. In the wake of a pandemic, we've all gone through a lot. We've also seen quite a bit of volunteering. And it may or may not impact or change the landscape of volunteering in any way. But if there is any message or any last closing thoughts that you would like to share with us and our audience, that would be great.
Ravi, I didn't hear.
Yeah, I think the experience of the pandemic has affected people in different ways. But my guess is that the empathy connection has generally grown stronger, for some really strong and for some less, but that's there in spite of the insecurities that have come in. It's one of those counterintuitive things. Sometimes with insecurities, empathy comes more rather than we go into our own shell. And it will still play out to see, how it affects, this generation, which has experienced, this is hard to imagine. I mean, we may read about a pandemic 100 years ago, but obviously also the pandemic 100 years ago and now would be very different, given the way it spread. So since you're specifically talking in that context, I think it will play out, but I'm hoping that empathy will play out in ways that will really connect us more to the causes that are trying to make the world a better place. But can't say. I mean, we don't really have. I think I would like to wait and watch and see. Yeah.
So I'm a diehard optimist. I actually believe that one thing that the pandemic or generally any disaster proves that there is inherent goodness in all of us, right? I mean, all kinds of people have reached out and help in the way that they can. Can people do more? Of course, yes, right? And can they do it more sustainably and consistently? Of course, yes, right? But I think in the last 2 years, what I've observed, Ananya, is that a lot more people have been able to reflect upon their own lives as well. So, for example, when there's a flood or when there's, some other kind of disaster, if it hasn't affected you personally, you will extend yourself only to a certain point, right? But I think what the pandemic has done is it's affected every one of us in one way or another, right? We've lost friends have lost families and things like that. So I think the point about the pointlessness of some of the things we do in life has been made much more stark to us, one. And two, I think just the innate nature, to help, to reach out and help, we've had the opportunity to do that. And I think a lot of us have felt good about it. So I do think that it will stay. I think it's an opportunity for organizations to keep the momentum of giving back going, of, reaching out, staying in touch, thanking, all of that. But to Ravi's point, memories are short. If we are out of this in the next year or two, we are going to get back into our old ways. And so it's important to ensure that we plan and invest time and strategies to make sure that the goodness that we're seeing around continues.
Thank you, Ravi Bhaiya. Thank you, Aarti.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something
Yeah.
to this, if you don't mind. I just happen to be reading a primatologist right now called Franz Deval, who's written this book called The Age of Empathy. And he uses the word age in two ways. The word that age means this is the age for something, like now, the times. And then he also used the word age as how long has empathy been with human beings? What is the sort of evolutionary point at which it came in? Why did it come in? It's quite fascinating what I'm learning from that book. A lot of people believe that empathy came with the development of the prefrontal cortex, where we started to separate from the primate sort of lineage that we come from, the apes and so on. With intelligence, we could actually understand the other person's pain, and that's where it was coming from. But he takes a stance and he tries to show that, and he's a primatologist, so he's like saying scientifically that it's much more, much earlier. It's a biological thing. It has not come with there, and it's especially a mammalian thing, but not just mammalian thing. And I think some of the prefrontal cortex fictions that we have created, like man as Homo economicus, it's complete fiction, right? We've created that, but the narrative has taken on to ourselves or to us. I think we need to have these experiences of a very physical sort of nature that will connect us to who we are biologically over millions of years, what we have evolved, right? What our inheritance there is. And when I say this, I'm really able to relate to what here, who was sharing? I think it was Anjali who was sharing that she came from an urban school. There's a lot of awareness because we are told a lot of things, but we don't get into the depth of the issues because it's all very bookish, right? And how high are the stakes? And when you have these close interactions, the kind of empathy it sparks makes it really real, and that may be leading to more commitment. So there is the opportunity here is also to create experiences like that. And I think for me, maybe I can take Prava's name and disclaimer, I've been on their board, so I'm talking about an organization that I've been a part of. But with young people, going out of the way to create experiences. And in fact, one of the first things that really, I was thinking of that when Anjali was sharing that, for me was my summer training in IIM Ahmedabad to work in an NGO. And I spent 2 months, 1 month in the foothills of Shivalik in the Ghar region and 1 month in Odisha. And that happened through a program called Smile. That was, one of the longest running programs, still runs. And I went way back in 1990, so 30 years ago. At that time, IGSSS was running it. Then Prava took it over. So now Prava has it. Student Mobilization Initiative for Learning Through Exposure. That's the acronym. I think programs like these really need to be, multiply many fold, because it's not that high commitment in terms of, your time. I mean, things like Teach for India, Gandhi Fellowship are doing that, but there need to be many more given our size of our country and the diversity of our country. And we'd see a lot more of this becoming long-term memory. I agree with Aarti. There's a short-term memory issue here. Becoming long-term memory, going deep into us, and the ways it could, bring benefits to everyone. It's going to be if you look at return on investment, leverage, all the sort of MBA terms, it's going to be phenomenal. If we were to look at it like that at a bigger society level narrative.
I couldn't agree more. That's all.
Right. No, I think this was such an insightful session and a lot of things. It's interesting that the points that are being made are not, they're certainly management points and how we conduct our own selves, our organizations as entities. But there's a very strong lens of philosophy also that I see coming up when we speak about the core of volunteering, or this whole discussion on empathy, and in what ways does it come up, or this idea of boards and them having and us having humility when we are interacting with volunteers in different capacities. So I just wanted to thank both of you, and also to the audience. We've been very interested to have conversations like this, because we want to really appreciate our volunteers. I remember when we started off, people said, oh, who designed your website, or who designed this? And I was also, I never was a fan of volunteering because I didn't know what this is or how strong it can be. But those questions that were being asked, their answers were always, oh, our volunteers did it. Oh, our volunteers did it. And I slowly understood, that they can be really powerful. And they've really given a lot to us. So one was to appreciate them. And second was to really get insights into different aspects relating to volunteering, and how we can evolve this space as well as we go on. So this is probably a start of the discussion like this, but having such discussions in the non-profit ecosystem is also giving a lot of inspiration to organizations like us and people as individuals. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to all the volunteers who were in the panel. Also to volunteers who are not on the panel. So Hanyu, Sarah, Marco, Sanchita, Taral, Meghna, all the volunteers who've ever worked with us or who, if they decide to work with us in the future, our audience, wherever you are, again, whichever place you're dialing in from or whichever language you speak. And if you want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out to us through our website, and have a wonderful evening if you're in India. Have a wonderful day if you're somewhere in the world. But thank you, stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.